A minivan sat dead on the shoulder of a dark interstate, hazard lights blinking against a wall of rain. And inside it, a man held his daughter's hand and prayed that the next set of headlights would slow down instead of roaring past. They had been there for 2 hours. 41 cars had gone by. None of them had stopped. The man's name was Daniel Reese, and 3 years before this night he had signed a piece of paper that ruined a good man's life, and he did not yet know that the good man was about to climb down out of a freight truck and walk toward him through the rain to help. That was the thing about that night, the thing nobody in the van understood as the 40-second set of headlights finally began to slow. The driver coming to save them was the same person Daniel had thrown away. He had no idea. Daniel had no idea. They were about to learn it together on the side of a road in the cold, with the engine ticking and the children watching from the back seat, and nothing between them but a name. If you have ever wondered whether the people we overlook keep a memory of it, stay with this one, because by the end you will know the answer. The truck pulled onto the shoulder ahead of them and stopped, and a figure stepped down into the rain, and the story that had been waiting 3 years to close finally began to move. Daniel Reese had not always been afraid of the dark. 3 years earlier, he had been a regional operations manager at a logistics company called Hartwell Freight, a man with a corner desk and a parking spot near the door, a man who signed off on schedules and budgets and, when the quarter ran tight, on the names of people who would no longer have jobs. He was good at it. That was the part he tried not to think about now. He had been good at deciding who stayed and who went, and he had been told that this was leadership. And he had believed it. He had a wife named Carla and 2 children, a daughter named Maya, who was 9 that year, and a son named Theo, who was 6, and a house with a mortgage that felt manageable because the paycheck was steady and the bonuses were real. He had believed that the steadiness would last because he had earned it. He had believed a lot of things back then, that the next 3 years would take apart one piece at a time. On a Tuesday in March of that first year, he had been handed a list of 14 names and told to cut it to 8 by Friday. He had cut it to 8 by Wednesday. One of the names on that list belonged to a man he had never really looked at, a yard worker and relief driver who had been with the company 11 years, and Daniel had moved that name into the gone column without slowing down, because the man had a small disciplinary note in his file, and the note made the decision easy. He did not check the note. He did not ask what it was about. He signed. The man's name was Marcus Hill. He was 38 that spring, a steady, quiet man who had worked the Hartwell yard since he was 27, loading trailers in the August heat and the January ice, covering routes when a driver called out sick, training the new hires nobody else had the patience to train. He knew every bay door in that yard, every trailer's quirks, which forklift pulled to the left. He had a daughter of his own, a girl named Nia, who was 7, and he had been raising her alone since her mother passed 2 winters before, gone in 11 weeks to something that started as a cough and ended in a hospital room. He worked the schedule around her, the early shifts so he could be there at the bus stop in the afternoon, and the yard supervisors who liked him let him, and the one who didn't kept a closer eye. The disciplinary note in his file, the one Daniel never read, was from a single incident the previous year. Marcus had refused to take a truck out on a long route because the brakes felt soft under his foot in the yard, spongy in a way 11 years had taught him not to ignore, and the maintenance log had been signed off as fine anyway. He had stood in the yard and said the truck was not safe and he would not drive it with his name on the run. He had been right about the brakes. The truck had been pulled and the line had a leak, and it was fixed before it killed anybody. But a supervisor he had embarrassed in front of the morning crew had written him up for insubordination. 2 lines into file, and the note had sat there like a stone, and when a manager in a corner office needed an easy name to move into the gone column, the stone did its quiet work. Marcus lost 11 years in a 2-line email that came at 4:40 on a Friday. He never met Daniel. He never knew the name of the man who signed. He only knew that on a Friday in March he was told his position had been eliminated effective, immediately, and that he had a 7-year-old at home and a rent due in 12 days, and $410 in a checking account. What Daniel did not know what he could not have known sitting in his corner office that March was that the decision he made in 90 seconds would outlive his job, his title, his parking spot, and very nearly his marriage. He would not connect the two things for years. He would not connect them, in fact, until a rainy night on an interstate when a man stepped down out of a truck and Daniel read the name stitched on his jacket and felt the bottom drop out of the world. But that was 3 years away. First, Daniel had to lose everything the easy way, the way men like him lose things, slowly and then all at once. The fall began 8 months after Marcus was cut. Hartwell Freight was bought by a larger company, and the larger company brought its own managers, and the men who had done the cutting discovered that they were just as easy to cut. Daniel got the call on a Thursday and the box on a Friday, the same way he had once handed them to others, and he stood in the corner office he had been proud of and put 11 years of his own into a single cardboard box. The framed photo of Carla and the kids, the coffee mug Maya had painted for him, the small brass nameplate that had sat on the edge of his desk where everyone could read it. He carried it out to his car in 2 trips. He sat in the parking lot with the box on the passenger seat for a long time before he could make himself turn the key, watching the door he had parked near for years, the spot with his name still stenciled faintly on the asphalt. He told Carla it would be fine when he got home that night. He had savings, he said. He had a reputation. He would land somewhere in a month, 2 at the most. She believed him because she loved him, and because there was no reason yet not to. He did not land in a month. He did not land in 6. The logistics field had tightened the same season everyone's had, and the men doing the hiring looked at a manager who had been let go and saw a risk instead of a resume. And the savings that had felt like a cushion turned out to be a calendar counting down toward a number that frightened him. The second car went first, sold to a younger couple who came to look at it on a Sunday. And Daniel handed over the keys in the driveway and waved as it pulled away, and then went inside and did not come out of the bedroom for an hour. Maya came out of dance class one evening to be told gently that this had been the last one, and she was 8 then and did not cry, which was worse, because she just nodded like she had already half understood. Carla took a job at a pharmacy counter, 2nd shift, and she pinned the little name tag to her shirt every afternoon and did not complain about it, even once. And Daniel learned what it felt like to watch his wife put on a uniform to keep the lights on, while he sat at the kitchen table under a lamp sending out applications that came back as silence or as a form rejection or did not come back at all. He started counting the silences. By the 8th month he had stopped counting. By the 2nd year the house was gone. They moved into a rented duplex on the other side of town, a place with thin walls and a furnace that knocked, and Daniel took the only steady work he could find, which was driving. He got his commercial license at 39, sitting in a classroom with men half his age, taking notes on air brakes and log books and hours of service, a former regional manager learning the floor of the work he had once scheduled from above. He started running short hauls for a small freight outfit, the kind of work he had once assigned to other people without thinking about the bodies that did it. He thought about the bodies now. He thought about them at 3 a.m. on a dark highway, with his lower back locked up, and his eyes burning and a thermos of bad coffee going cold in the holder, and somewhere in those long nights, without quite admitting it to himself, he began to understand the list of 14 names differently. He began to understand that every name had been a man like him, sitting at a kitchen table under a lamp telling a wife it would be fine. He would catch himself on the long flat stretches running the math of it. 14 names, 8 cut, 6 families he had reached into and rearranged with a signature. And he could not picture a single face. And that was the worst part. He never thought of Marcus by name. He did not remember the name. But he carried a guilt he could not place, a low, constant ache like a tooth. A sense that somewhere out in the dark there were people he had hurt without ever once looking at them, and the not knowing was its own slow punishment. This is the part of the story where the world usually keeps its silence, where the man who hurt people goes on never knowing, and the people he hurt go on never being repaid. But the world keeps a longer memory than that. Marcus Hill had not vanished when Hartwell cut him. He had done what men like Marcus do. He had taken the $410 and stretched it across the weeks, cooked from the cheap end of the grocery store, told Naya the lean dinners were a kind of game so she would not feel the fear in the house. He borrowed against his old truck at a rate he hated, got his commercial license, upgraded to the long-haul class, and started driving for himself, sleeping in the cab to save a motel, washing up at fuel desk sinks at dawn. The first year nearly broke him. There was a stretch in that first winter when the loads dried up, and he sat in a freezing cab in a rest area doing sums on the back of a fuel receipt, $11 away from not making the rent, and he had prayed that night the way a man prays when the prayer is the only thing left in his hands. The loads came back. He made the rent. The second year he made it every month. By the third year he had paid off the truck outright and built a small reputation as a driver who showed up, who never ran a load late, who pulled over on a dark shoulder when other drivers blew past at 70. He had a name in the regional yards now. The name was his own, and he wore it stitched in white thread on the chest of his work jacket, the way long-haul drivers do, because at a fuel desk or a loading dock a name is how a man is known. Marcus Hill. 2 words in white thread. He had earned every letter of it back from the place that had thrown it away. On the night the story turns, Marcus was running a load of canned goods east on the interstate, 11 hours into a shift, when his headlights caught a minivan on the shoulder, with its hazards blinking, and a man standing in the rain beside it, waving both arms. Marcus had passed 100 stranded cars in his years on the road, and he had learned which ones to stop for and which ones not to, and something about this one, the children's faces pale in the back window, the man's arms moving with the particular desperation of someone who has been waving for a long time, made him slow the truck and pull onto the shoulder ahead of them. He set his flashers. He pulled his hood up. He climbed down into the cold and walked back along the wet gravel toward the van, and he did not know, as he walked, that he was about to look into the face of the man who had signed his name onto a list 3 years before. He only knew that there were children in the cold and a father who needed help, and that was reason enough. Daniel saw the driver coming and felt the first real relief he had felt in 2 hours. The van had died without warning on the dark stretch. The engine's simply gone between 1 mile marker and the next, the dash lights dimming and the wheel going heavy as he coasted onto the shoulder. His phone had 1 bar that came and went with the weather, and the tow company had quoted him 90 minutes that had stretched into a dropped call, and then a silence on the line. Carla was in the passenger seat with Theo, asleep against her shoulder, 6 years old and dead to the world, the way only small children can be. Miser was awake in the back, watching out the streaming window, old enough now at 12 to understand that her father was afraid and was working hard not to let her see it. 41 cars had passed them, taillights swelling and shrinking and gone. Daniel had stopped waving somewhere around the 30th, then made himself start again. Because what else was there to do with your hands when your children were cold into the dark and the rain was coming sideways? When the truck slowed and its flashers came on and it eased onto the shoulder ahead of them, he felt his throat tighten with a gratitude that surprised him with its force. He pulled his collar up and stepped out into the rain to meet the driver, and the 2 men came together in the red wash of the truck's hazards. And Daniel started to say thank you, started to explain about the engine and the tow that never came, and then his eyes dropped to the name, stitched in white thread on the driver's chest, and every word he had ready died in his mouth. He knew the name, not the way you know a stranger's name, the way you know a name that has been sitting in the bottom of you for 3 years like a stone. You could not name Marcus Hill. He had not remembered it, not consciously, not in all the nights he had spent thinking about the 14 names he could not picture. But the moment he read it in white thread on a wet jacket on the side of a road, the whole list came back to him, and the gone column came back to him, and the 2-line emails came back to him, and he understood with a sick falling certainty that the man who had stopped to help him was a man he had thrown away. Marcus saw the change in the father's face and did not understand it. He saw a man go pale, saw the thank you stall on his lips, saw something that looked almost like fear. He thought maybe the man was in shock from the cold. He stepped closer and said it would be all right, that he had a tow chain and could get them off the shoulder to the next exit where there was a lit lot and a diner, that nobody was going to leave them out here. He said it the way he said everything, plainly and without weight, a man stating what he intended to do. And Daniel, standing in the rain with his ruined name come back to find him, could not speak. He got them off the shoulder, that was the first thing. Marcus hooked the chain and eased the van forward to the next exit, 2 miles east, where a truck stop sat lit up against the dark with a diner attached, and he guided Daniel into a parking space and unhooked the chain and told him the engine was likely a failed fuel pump, which was not a roadside fix, but was a tomorrow problem instead of a tonight emergency. He told Daniel to get the children inside where it was warm and dry, to get them something hot, and to call the tow in the morning when the rates dropped and the shops opened. He did all of this in the rain, soaked through, 11 hours into his own shift, with his own daughter waiting at home for him to finish the run. He asked for nothing. He did not even give his name, beyond the one stitched on his chest, and he turned to walk back to his truck. Daniel stopped him. He had to. He could not let the man walk away into the dark a second time without knowing. Inside the diner, under the fluorescent lights, with Carla settling the children into a booth and ordering them hot chocolate from a tired waitress with a coffee pot in each hand, Daniel asked Marcus to sit down for a moment, just a moment, and Marcus, tired and wet and wanting to get home to his own daughter, looked at the man for a second and then sat. Steam rose off both their jackets in the warm air, a jukebox somewhere played low, and Daniel, who had spent 3 years carrying a guilt he could not place, finally placed it. He asked Marcus if he had worked at Hartwell Freight. He watched the man's face change, watched the name of the place land somewhere behind his eyes. He asked if he had been let go 3 years before, in the spring. Marcus said yes, slowly, not understanding yet how this soaked stranger off the side of a road knew the worst Friday of his life. And Daniel told him. He told him he had been the operations manager. He told him he had signed the list. He told him he had not even read the note in the file, had not asked what the break story was, had moved a name from one column to another in 90 seconds because the note made it easy and the quarter was tight, and a man in a corner office does not slow down for stones he does not bother to pick up. He said the words out loud for the first time in 3 years. "I'm the one who signed your name," he said. "I never even read it. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." His voice broke on the last of it. And across the table, Marcus Hill set down his coffee very carefully and went still. The diner was quiet around them. A trucker 2 booths over worked through a plate of eggs without looking up. The rain ran down the dark windows in long crooked lines, and the headlights of the trucks in the lot smeared and ran in the glass. Maya watched her father's face from the next booth, her hot chocolate untouched, understanding that something enormous was happening even if she could not name it. Carla had gone quiet too, one hand resting on Theo's back as he slept against her. And Marcus, looking at the man across from him, did the arithmetic of 3 years in the space of a few breaths. The corner office manager who had ended his 11 years was sitting in front of him in a soaked jacket with the same kind of name stitched on the chest as his own, driving freight at 3 in the morning, his children asleep 2 miles back in a dead minivan he could not afford to fix tonight. The man who had thrown him away had fallen all the way down to the same road. There was a version of this moment that could have gone hard, and both men knew it, and the knowing sat on the table between them, like a third cup of coffee no one was going to drink. Marcus had earned the right to that version. He had carried his own weight up out of that pit alone, with a 7-year-old to feed, and a rent that did not care whose fault it was. Here was the man who had pushed him in, soaked and shaking and weeping into a paper napkin, asking in not so many words to be forgiven for it. Marcus did not take the hard version. He sat with it for a long moment, turning his coffee cup slowly on the table, and then he asked one question. He asked whether Daniel had kids the night he signed the list. Daniel said yes, both of them. Maya would have been 9. The same age Marcus would later learn his own Naya had been close to. Marcus nodded slowly, like a man confirming something he had already guessed. He said he had figured as much. He said the thing he had learned in 3 years of clawing his way back was that the men who do the cutting almost never see the people they cut, that they are not cruel so much as far away, signing names on a high floor where the names do not have faces or rent or daughters. He said he had spent the whole first year hating a name he did not even know, a faceless signature, and that the hate had cost him more than the lost job ever had sat in his chest on the long night drives and made him short with Naya and hard with himself. He said he had finally set it down somewhere in the second year, on a rest area night when he caught himself snapping at his own little girl over nothing, and understood that the man in the corner office was still reaching into his life 2 years later, still rearranging it, and that the only way to make it stop was to refuse to carry him anymore. He said he was not going to pick that weight back up now, just because the name had finally walked up out of the rain and given itself a face. He said all of this plainly, the way he said everything, no heat in it, and Daniel sat across from him and wept openly. In a diner at 3 a.m, a grown man with his face in a paper napkin, because the man he had wronged was being kinder to him than he had ever once been to himself. That could have been the end of it. 2 men, a road, a truth told and a grace given. But the night was not finished, because grace in this story does not just settle accounts, it changes lives. And Marcus Hill was not done being the answer to a prayer Daniel did not know he had been praying. Before he left the diner, Marcus asked Daniel what he was driving for now, and Daniel told him the name of Small Outfit, and Marcus knew it. Knew it was a hard place to drive for, late pay and bad routes and trucks held together with hope. And Marcus, who in 3 years had built something of his own, told Daniel that he had started a small company. 2 trucks now, about to be 3, and he was looking for a driver he could trust, someone who knew the work and would show up. He said he had not expected to find that driver tonight. He said it almost with a smile. He told Daniel to come see him at the yard on Monday. That he could not promise the moon, but he could promise honest pay and routes that let a man sleep in his own bed most nights. He wrote the address on a napkin and slid it across the table, and Daniel looked at the napkin and then at the man and could not understand how the world had bent this far back toward mercy. What Daniel did not know, sitting in that diner, was that Marcus had made his decision before he knew who Daniel was. He had stopped for a stranded family in the rain because that was who he was, the same way he had refused the truck with the soft brakes 3 years before because that was who he was, the same way he had trained the new hires nobody wanted. The grace was not a reaction to the revelation. The grace came first. The revelation only revealed that the man on the receiving end of it was the last man on earth who deserved it, and Marcus had given it anyway. That was the Daniel would spend the rest of his life trying to understand. He had built his old career on the idea that some people earned their place and some people didn't, and here was a man tearing that idea down with a napkin and an address, giving a job to the one person who had taken his. Daniel went to the yard on Monday. He did not quite believe the napkin until he was standing in front of it, a small gravel lot off a service road with 2 trucks parked nose out, and a third bay sitting empty and waiting, and a portable office at the edge of the lot, with a space heater humming orange in the corner, and a coffee maker that had seen better years. Marcus was there in coveralls, doing his own books at a metal desk, because a company that's small does everything itself. He stood and shook Daniel's hand and waved him to the folding chair across the desk. He showed Daniel the routes on a worn map taped to the wall, the regional loops that let a driver sleep in his own bed most nights. He showed him the pay, which was real, on time, every 2 weeks, the thing Daniel's current outfit could never quite manage. He did not make a speech. He did not pull the past out of a drawer and read it aloud. He said welcome, and that was that. And then he introduced Daniel to the other driver, a younger man named Reggie, who had come in off a run and was leaning in the doorway with a sandwich, 26 and lean and careful, a man who had come up the hard way and reminded Daniel, painfully, of every name on the list he had never read. Reggie sized him up the way new drivers size each other up, then nodded and said the routes were fair and the boss was straight, which from a young man who had been burned before was the highest thing he could have said. Just a man giving another man a chance, the way someone should have given Marcus a chance 3 years before instead of moving his name into the gone column. Daniel drove for Marcus Hill. He was good at it. And being good at it meant something different now than it had in the corner office. Because now he knew the weight of the loads he carried and the cost of the miles in his own back. He learned Reggie's story in pieces over shared coffee at dawn, the kid brother, the night classes, the way Reggie sent money home every month without ever being asked. He learned the rhythm of a small company where everyone covered for everyone, where Marcus would take a route himself at midnight if a driver's kid was sick, where the work was honest and the pay was honest, and a man was not a name in a column but a face you saw every Monday and a voice on the radio at 2. In the morning telling you to watch the ice on the overpass. Carla noticed the change in Daniel before he could name it himself. He came home different. He slept through the night again. He stopped sending the silent applications and took the little name tag off the bedroom dresser where it had sat reproaching him and put it in a drawer. He had found at the bottom of everything he had lost a thing he had never had at the top, which was the company of a man he could not stop trying to deserve. It took Daniel almost a year to do the thing he had been building toward. He had been saving carefully, the way a man saves when he has learned how fast it all goes, and one evening he came to the yard after the others had left and found Marcus at the few. Space heater with the books. He sat down across from him the way he had sat down in the diner a year before, and he told Marcus that he had never been able to make right the thing he'd had done. The 11 years, the worst Friday, the rent due in 12 days that Marcus had never told him about, but that Daniel had imagined 1,000 times. He could not give those years back. But he had found something out, asking quietly around the old yards, about the supervisor who had written the false note that made Marcus easy to cut, the note about the soft breaks and the insubordination that was never insubordination at all. He had the whole story now documented, the maintenance log and the pulled truck and the write-up that punished a man for being right. He had typed it all up. And he wanted to send it to the new owners of Hartwell, not for himself, but so that the record would finally say what was true, so that anyone who ever pulled Marcus Hill's old file would read the truth instead of the stone. Marcus was quiet for a long time. He looked at the pages Daniel had set on the desk. 11 years finally written down correctly, the breaks that had been soft, the truck that had been pulled, the man who had been right and punished for it. It would not give him the years back. Both of them knew that. But it would clear the name, the same name, stitched in white thread on the jacket hanging by the door. And a cleared name is not nothing to a man who built everything back from one. Marcus looked up at Daniel and said the thing that closed the circle between them, that he had stopped that night for a stranded family, because nobody had stopped for him, and that he had not expected the family to be the one that needed him most of all. He folded the pages carefully and put them in the drawer, and he told Daniel to send them. 2 years after the night on the interstate, Hartwell Freight, under its new owners, issued a quiet correction to an old personnel file and an apology that arrived 3 years too late, but arrived. It came on company letterhead in a plain envelope, a single page acknowledging that the disciplinary note had been entered in error, that the driver had been correct about the equipment, that the company regretted the entry and its consequences. Marcus did not frame it. He did not need to. He had a company of his own by then, 4 trucks and 3 drivers, and a name in every regional yard that meant a man who showed up and did right by a load. But he kept the letter in the same drawer where he kept the pages Daniel had written, and once in a while, on a slow evening with the space heater humming and the lot dark, he would slide the drawer open and take the letter out and read it again and think about the long, patient way the truth had travelled to find him. Dyer was 9 now, the same age Maya had been the spring her father signed the list, and she did her homework at the desk in the corner of the office, while her father did the books, chewing the end of a pencil, and she did not know any of the story yet. One day he would tell her. He would tell her that a man hurt them badly without ever once seeing them, that the world in its long and patient way had brought that same man down the same dark road, and that her father had chosen, on a night of rain and headlights, to be the one who pulled over. Daniel still drives for him. Some Mondays, when the lot is empty and the trucks are out, the two men have coffee in the portable office before the day starts, the manager who fell and the driver who caught him. And they do not talk much about the past anymore, because the past has been said and answered. On the wall by the door hangs the work jacket with the name stitched in white thread. The name a corner office tried to erase and a rainy night gave back. And below it, on a small hook, hangs a second jacket now with a second name, because Daniel earned the right to one too. He looks at the first name every morning when he comes in. He has never stopped being grateful for the night he read it wrong, the night he thought it spelled his ruin and found instead that it spelled tis way back. Some debts cannot be paid. They can only be answered, and the answer is to become the kind of person who stops. Marcus stopped on a dark road for a family he did not know, and in stopping he saved two men, and only one of them had a dead engine. Have you ever been stopped for, on a night you thought no one was coming? If you have, you know what Daniel knew when he read that name in the rain. And if you want another story of the people we overlook coming back to save us, there is one waiting for you right here.